Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Crowds of Sudanese citizens are out on the streets of the capital Khartoum to protest for a second day against Monday's military coup. At least 10 people were reported killed and dozens injured, many of them as a result of soldiers opening fire on protesters. There is heavy security deployments and units have blocked the bridges connecting the city. The UN has demanded that the military release the Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok, and other civilian leaders of the transitional government, while the US State Department has released a joint statement co-signed by the UK and Norway.
I was in Khartoum just last week, where I stressed the need for all parties to support the civilian-led government's work to deliver the democratic transition, the process agreed by all sides in the Constitutional Declaration of August 2019. The military leadership in Khartoum cannot claim to be committed to a democratic future while simultaneously acting unilaterally to dissolve the transitional institutions and arrest leading civilian politicians.
The Australian government has announced its plan to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. The announcement comes a week before the COP26 in Glasgow, the biggest international summit about climate. Under the net zero plan, the Australian government plans to invest $20 billion by the end of the decade in developing low emissions technologies. However, Prime Minister Scott Morrison has pointed out the country won't put a definitive end to its fossil fuel sector, which has drawn international criticism. The country is one of the dirtiest countries per head of the population and a massive exporter of fossil fuels. A group of women have defiantly marched through the streets of the Afghan capital Kabul, demanding rights to education and work under the Taliban. The group held placards and chanted slogans. More than 2 months after the Taliban took over the country, older girls are still not back at school, and there are no women in senior positions in the new government. Afghanistan is also facing the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world, with the country seeing a sharp deterioration in the situation since the Taliban seized power. International funds which propped up the country's fragile economy have largely been stopped. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has found his social media platforms suspended after posting a video about the supposed link between COVID-19 and AIDS.
Relatórios oficiais do governo do Reino Unido.
Facebook removed the video, followed by YouTube suspending the leader's accounts for 1 week. In the clip, he claimed that the official reports from the British government suggested that fully vaccinated people against COVID-19 are more at risk for immune deficiency syndrome. Hurricane Rick's strong winds have continued to move further inland in Mexico, with heavy rains carrying the potential to trigger flash flooding and mudslides. Rick was packing maximum sustained winds of 80 miles per hour. It is forecast to move over southern Mexico with heavy rains raising water levels of rivers, causing flooding in low-lying areas. No fatalities have yet been reported. Japan's Princess Mako has given up her royal title to marry her college sweetheart Kei Komuro in a ceremony that has divided the nation. There was none of the usual pomp that usually marks a royal wedding, with the couple also turning down the traditional payment of $1.3 million. The understated ceremony follows a 4-year engagement coloured by scandal and delay. There were protests on the streets, with many criticising the marriage after reports of a money scandal involving Komuro's mother. The couple are expected now to move to the US, where Mr. Komuro works as a lawyer. Blue Origin, the space exploration company owned by Jeff Bezos, has unveiled plans to develop a commercial space station called Orbital Reef. In partnership with Boeing, they aim to launch the spacecraft in the second half of this decade. It's hoped Orbital Reef will operate as a mixed-use business park, providing the infrastructure needed to open new markets in space.
To space and back for that.
And finally, what is thought to be the world's first postage stamp, known as Penny Black, is being offered at auction with a price estimate of up to $8.25 million. Dating from 1840, the item is the earliest securely dated example of the first postage stamp. Featuring a profile of Queen Victoria, it cost a flat rate. Before that, the recipient had to cover the cost of the postage. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.